The discovery. Kira Novik pressed herself against the cold metal wall of Maintenance Tunnel B7, holding her breath as another patrol passed by. Their heavy boots echoed through the cramped passage, making her heart pound. At 12 years old, she was small enough to hide in the shadows between the power conduits, a skill that had served her well in the 3 years since she'd been orphaned on Stellar Station Epsilon. The patrol's footsteps faded, and Kira allowed herself to breathe again. She pulled out her tablet, checking the stolen maintenance schedule she'd downloaded. According to the logs, this section would be clear for another 2 hours. Perfect. She discovered the breach in the station's outer hull 3 days ago, a small crack that the repair drones had missed, hidden behind a loose panel. What caught her attention wasn't the breach itself, but what lay beyond it. A massive shape floating in the darkness, its surface covered in what looked like ancient script. Kira pulled herself through the maintenance shaft, her worn boots finding purchase on the textured metal floor. The tablet's soft blue glow illuminated her face, highlighting a scar above her right eyebrow, a souvenir from her parents' last salvage mission, the one they never returned from. Come on, she muttered, reaching the loose panel. Her fingers found the edges, carefully prying it away. The vacuum seal had weakened here, making her job easier. From her backpack, she retrieved a portable force field generator borrowed from the maintenance bay when no one was looking. The device hummed to life, creating a shimming barrier between her and the void. Through it, she could see her discovery more clearly now, a ship, but unlike any she'd ever seen. Its hull was dark and sleek, almost organic in its design, with patterns that seemed to shift in the starlight. Kira secured her tether and activated her magnetic boots. With practiced ease, she pushed through the force field, the artificial gravity falling away as she crossed into space. The mystery ship loomed before her, far larger than she'd initially thought. Its hull was covered in crystalline formations that pulsed with a faint, bluish light. "What are you?" she whispered, her words lost in the vacuum of space. Her scanner picked up no energy signatures, no signs of life. According to every reading, the ship was dead, but something about those crystals. She reached the hull, her boots connecting with a soft thunk. Up close, the crystalline formations were even more beautiful, like frozen lightning trapped in glass. Kira pulled out her collection tool, another borrowed piece of equipment, and carefully extracted a small sample. The moment the crystal broke free, everything changed. Light erupted from the fracture point, spreading across the hull like cracks in ice. The entire ship began to hum, a vibration she could feel through her boots. No, Kira scrambled backward, but it was too late. The ship was awakening. Back on the station, alarms began to blare. Emergency lights flashed through the viewport windows. She could already imagine the chaos. Security teams mobilizing, sensors going crazy, communication officers trying to explain the massive energy surge to their superiors. Kira clutched the crystal shard to her chest, its light pulsing in sync with her racing heart. She had to get back inside, had to hide this before they found her. But as she turned to retreat, her headlamp illuminated something that made her freeze. More writing, but this time she could read it. The symbols were shifting, transforming into words she understood. To those who seek the gates, beware. Some doors are better left closed. A massive shadow fell over her. Through the force field, she saw a ship dropping out of hyperspace, a Galactic Alliance cruiser, its weapons already charging. They'd arrived far too quickly for this to be a coincidence. They'd been watching, waiting. Kira looked down at the crystal in her hands, then back at the approaching cruiser. She had a choice to make, and about 30 seconds to make it. Behind her, the ancient ship continued to awaken, its hull now thrumming with energy that made her teeth ache. She'd wanted an adventure, something to break the monotony of station life. Looking at the crystal's pulsing light, at the Alliance cruiser bearing down on her position, at the mysterious ship coming to life beneath her feet, Kira had a feeling she was about to get exactly what she'd wished for. And she wasn't entirely sure that was a good thing. The escape. Captain Jun Yamamoto was having a spectacularly bad day, even before the girl crashed through his ship's ventilation system. He'd been in the middle of arguing with Port Authority about their outrageous docking fees when she literally dropped into his cargo hold. sending his first mate Rockar jumping backward with a startled roar that made his leonine mane stand on end. "Don't move," the girl shouted, scrambling to her feet. She was small, dirty, and clutching something that glowed like captured starlight. "Are you pirates?" Jun raised an eyebrow. "Do we look like pirates?" "You look like smugglers," she said, eyes darting between him and Rockar. "Which is close enough." "We're legitimate merchants," Jun protested, though he couldn't quite meet her eyes when he said it. The girl's gaze fell on the suspicious-looking crates behind him, clearly labeled "totally not contraband." "Perfect," she said. "I need passage off this station right now." A distant explosion rocked the docking bay, making them all stumble. Through the cargo hold's viewport, Jun saw security forces rushing past, their weapons drawn. Behind them marched figures in sleek black armor, definitely not station security. "Please," the girl added, her voice smaller now. "They're coming for this." She held up the crystal, its light casting strange shadows across her face. "And they'll kill anyone who gets in their way." Jun's fingers drummed against his thigh holster. He should turn her in. It would be the smart play, the safe play. But something in her eyes reminded him of himself at that age, desperate, alone, and in way over his head. "Rockar," he said finally, "fire up the engines." The massive leonine alien grinned, showing impressive fangs. Finally, some excitement. "I'm Kira," the girl said as they rushed toward the bridge. "And you probably want to know what's going on." "Let me guess," Jun said, sliding into the pilot's seat. "You found something you shouldn't have, took something you shouldn't have, and now very powerful people want it back." "That's surprisingly accurate." The ship's engines roared to life as Rockar worked his magic in engineering. On the screens, Jun could see more Alliance forces converging on their position. But they weren't the only ones. Ships were dropping out of hyperspace, sleek, predatory vessels that didn't match any known registry. "Raiders," Jun muttered, because this day wasn't complicated enough. The docking clamps released with a shudder. Jun's fingers flew across the controls, bringing weapons and shields online. His ship, the Star Wanderer, might look like a simple merchant vessel, but she had teeth when she needed them. "They're not just raiders," Kira said, clutching the crystal tighter. "They're after the gates. They must have decoded part of the message too." "What gates?" Rockar's voice crackled over the intercom. "What message?" Another explosion rocked the station. Through the viewport, Jun saw the mysterious ancient ship Kira had discovered starting to move, its crystalline surface now blazing with light. "The gates between worlds," Kira said. "This crystal, it's like a key, and that ship out there, it's a map to all of them." Jun cursed in 3 different languages. Of course it is, because simple smuggling jobs are apparently too much to ask for. The Star Wanderer lifted off just as the first shots blazed past their hull. Jun threw them into a spiral, weaving between docking pylons as both Alliance forces and raiders opened fire. "Rockar," Jun shouted, "I need everything you've got." "The engines are already at 110%. "Then give me 120%. The ship screamed in protest as Jun pushed her harder, diving beneath a raider vessel and using its bulk as cover from Alliance fire. But they were surrounded, trapped between 2 forces that would happily reduce them to atoms. That's when Kira did something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. She pressed the crystal against the ship's navigation console. "No, wait," Jun started to say, but it was too late. Light exploded from the crystal, flooding through the ship's systems. The console flickered, died, then came back online displaying symbols Jun had never seen before. The ship shuddered, then moved like it never had before, dancing between enemy fire with impossible grace. "What did you do?" Jun demanded, watching in amazement as his ship performed maneuvers that should have torn it apart. "I didn't do anything," Kira said, equally shocked. "The crystal, it's interfacing with your ship somehow. It's trying to help us escape." A new alert flashed on the screen. The ancient ship was moving again, positioning itself between them and their pursuers. Energy built along its crystalline surface. "Brace," Jun shouted. The ancient vessel released a pulse of energy that rippled through space like a stone dropped in a pond. Alliance ships and raiders alike went dark, their systems overloaded. "Jump coordinates appearing," Rakar reported, his voice filled with awe. They're unlike anything I've ever seen." Jun looked at Kira, who stared back with a mixture of fear and determination. He had a choice to make: trust in whatever power they'd stumbled into, or stay and face the consequences. "Your call, Captain," Rakar said. Jun took a deep breath. Plot the course, sometimes the only way out is through. The Star Wanderer's engines flared bright enough to rival the station's sun. As they prepared to jump, Jun caught a glimpse of the ancient ship beginning to move on its own, following a course only it knew. They were committed now. For better or worse, they were part of whatever destiny Kira had uncovered in those maintenance tunnels. As the ship entered hyperspace, leaving chaos in their wake, Jun could only hope they'd survive long enough to understand what they'd gotten themselves into. The crystal pulsed in Kira's hands, like a heartbeat, like a promise, like a warning. The secret. The Star Wanderer drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, its systems powered down to minimal levels. In the ship's dimly lit common area, Kira sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by holographic projections generated by the crystal. Captain Jun paced nearby, while Rakar hunched over a console, his mane tied back as he worked. "There," Kira said, pointing to a particular sequence of symbols. "It keeps showing this pattern." Dr. Venna Nash, their newest addition, leaned forward with interest. The quantum archaeologist had been rescued from a research station they'd stopped at for supplies, though kidnapped might have been a more accurate term, given how eager she'd been to study the crystal. "Fascinating," Venna murmured, her silver eyes reflecting the holographic light. "These aren't just coordinates, they're frequencies, quantum frequencies." "In basic, please," Jun said, pausing his packing. "Some of us didn't spend a decade studying ancient technology." Venna's phosphorescent skin pulsed with excitement. The ancients didn't build stargates or wormholes. They found naturally occurring quantum threads connections in the fabric of space-time and learned to stabilize them. "And the crystals?" Rakar rumbled from his station. "Keys," Kira said suddenly, the realization hitting her. "They're not just keys, they're maps. Each one shows the way to a different thread." "Exactly," Venna clapped her four-fingered hands. "But more than that, the crystals are part of a control system. The ancients built a network to manage these quantum threads to prevent them from becoming unstable." A warning alarm chirped from Rakar's console. "Speaking of unstable," he growled, "we've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace." Jun moved to the viewport, his expression grim. "Raiders, they must have tracked our energy signature." "No," Kira said, studying the crystal's projections. "They followed the quantum disturbances we're creating. Every time we activate the crystal, it sends ripples through the threads." The ships appeared on their screens, sleek, predatory vessels decorated with blood-red markings. The infamous Red Scar Syndicate, known for hunting down and selling ancient artifacts to the highest bidder. "We need to move," Jun started to say, but Venna cut him off. "Wait, look at this." She pointed to new symbols appearing in the hologram. "The crystal is trying to tell us something. These readings. There's a quantum thread nearby, a big one." The crystal pulsed brighter, its light synchronizing with the ship systems just as it had during their escape from the station. New information flooded their screens. "By the void," Venna breathed. "It's not just a thread, it's a nexus point, a place where multiple threads converge." "That's great," Jun said, "but those raiders are powering up weapons." The first shot streaked past their bow, forcing Jun to take evasive action. The Star Wanderer shuddered as it came to life, systems re-engaging. But something was wrong. The raiders weren't just firing weapons. They were launching some kind of energy net, trying to snare the Wanderer. "They don't want to destroy us," Rakar realized. "They want the crystal." Kira stood, the crystal clutched to her chest, its light now almost blinding. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite her fear, "I think I know what we need to do, but you're not going to like it." "When do I ever?" Jun muttered, but gestured for her to continue. The crystal isn't just showing us the nexus point, it's showing us how to activate it. Vena's eyes widened. Without a proper stabilization facility, the energy requirements alone would be met by the raiders firing at us, Kira finished. We can use their own weapons against them. The crystal can absorb and redirect that energy. Jun stared at her. You want to open an untested quantum thread while being shot at by raiders. Actually, Kira said, managing a small smile, I want to open several quantum threads at once. Understanding dawned on Vena's face. The nexus point, if we can trigger multiple threads simultaneously. We create a quantum storm, Kira nodded. One that'll swallow anything nearby. Except us, Rockar asked hopefully. The crystal will protect us, I think. It's been helping us this whole time, showing us what we need to know. Another blast rocked the ship. The raiders were getting closer, their energy net beginning to interfere with the Wanderer's systems. Jun looked at each of his crew members in turn. Rockar, his oldest friend and most trusted ally. Vena, brilliant and possibly mad. And Kira, a child who carried the weight of an ancient secret with more courage than most adults he knew. For the record, he said, taking the pilot's seat, this is insane. Noted, Kira replied, pressing the crystal against the ship's main console. Vena, I'll need your help calculating the resonance frequencies. Already on it, the archaeologist said, her fingers flying across multiple screens. Rockar will need full power to the deflector array. The Leonine engineer grinned. Oh, we'll have power all right. Might blow out half our systems, but we'll have power. The raiders were almost upon them now, their energy net moments away from trapping the Wanderer. The crystal's light spread through the ship systems like liquid starfire, transforming displays into windows into another reality. Ready? Kira asked, though it wasn't really a question. Jun took a deep breath. Sometimes the only way out is through. Kira nodded and closed her eyes, letting the crystal's knowledge flow through her. Around them, space itself began to tear, quantum threads manifesting as shimmering tears in reality. The raiders realized too late what was happening, their attempts to flee hampered by their own energy net. The last thing Kira saw before the quantum storm engulfed them was the look of awe on her companions' faces as reality itself unraveled and rewove itself around their ship. They were about to learn if the ancient secrets would be their salvation or their doom the Alliance. The quantum storm had spat them out somewhere in the outer rim, in a system so old its sun had nearly burned out. The Star Wanderer limped through space, its hull still crackling with residual energy from their desperate escape. Status report, Jun called out, his voice hoarse from shouting orders during their transition. Engines at 40%, Rockar reported from engineering. Life support stable, but auxiliary systems are fried. We're lucky we're still in one piece. Dr. Vena Nash was hunched over her instruments, silver eyes wide with wonder. The quantum readings are off the scale. What we just did, it should have been impossible. Kira didn't respond. She lay slumped in her chair, the crystal dark and cold in her hands. She hadn't moved since they'd emerged from the storm. Kira, Jun moved to her side, checking her pulse. She's breathing, but her skin is like ice. The crystal drew power through her, Vena explained, running a scanner over the girl's body. The human nervous system isn't designed to channel quantum energies. She needs rest. A new alarm blared, making them all jump. Rockar growled from his station. Multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace, big ones. Through the viewport, massive vessels materialized against the dying sun's light. Their hulls bore the distinctive markings of the Free World's coalition, the only major power that had successfully resisted both the Galactic Alliance and the Raiders. This is Admiral Elena Torres of the Coalition Fleet, a voice crackled over their comm. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. We have questions about the quantum event we just detected. Jun looked at his crew. They were in no shape for another fight. Options. We could try another quantum jump, Vena suggested, but Rockar shook his head. The engines won't survive it, neither might Kira. Jun closed his eyes for a moment, then opened the channel. Admiral Tors, this is Captain Jun Yamamoto. Request permission to come aboard and explain our situation. We have injured crew requiring medical attention. There was a long pause before Tors responded. Granted, but any hostile action will be met with immediate lethal force. Within an hour, they found themselves in the pristine medical bay of Tor's flagship, the Liberty's Dawn. Kira lay in a healing pod while Coalition doctors monitored her vitals. Jun and his crew were surrounded by armed guards, but at least they weren't in cells. Admiral Tors cut an imposing figure as she strode into the medical bay. Her cybernetic eye glowed faintly as it scanned them, while her organic one studied them with careful intensity. So, she said, you've discovered the quantum threads. Do you have any idea what you've done? Enlighten us, Jun replied cautiously. Tors gestured, and a hologram appeared showing a map of known space. Red dots began appearing, spreading like a virus. These are quantum disturbances caused by your little stunt. You've destabilized the entire network. Every major power in the galaxy can now detect the threads. The raiders already knew about them, Rockar pointed out. Yes, but they didn't have proof or the means to access them. Tor's cybernetic eye focused on the crystal, still clutched in Kira's unconscious hands. Until now. Admiral, Venna stepped forward, earning several raised weapons from the guards. The threads aren't just passages through space. They're part of a control system. The ancients built it to prevent natural quantum events from tearing reality apart. And now that system is failing, a new voice said. They turned to see a tall figure entering the medical bay. His coalition uniform bore the insignia of chief scientist, but something about him made Jun's instincts scream danger. This is Dr. Marcus Vale, Tors introduced him, our leading expert on quantum mechanics. Vale moved to examine the crystal, but even unconscious, Kira's grip tightened. Fascinating. The girl appears to have formed a quantum entanglement with the artifact. This could explain how they managed to activate the thread. What do you mean the system is failing? Jun asked, not liking the way Vale was looking at Kira. The threads are natural phenomena, Vale explained. The ancients didn't create them, they merely built a network to control them, but that network has been dormant for millennia. Your actions have begun to wake it up, but without proper control. The threads will tear open randomly, Venna finished, horror in her voice. They could appear anywhere, swallowing entire worlds. Precisely why the crystal needs to be placed in more qualified hands, Vale said smoothly. Tors frowned. That's not your decision to make, Doctor. No, Vale smiled, and suddenly guards were turning their weapons on each other. I think it is. Jun's hand dropped to where his blaster should have been as Vale's true allies revealed themselves. The scientist's smile widened as he produced a familiar red crystal from his coat. Did you think you'd found the only one? He asked. The Red Scar Syndicate has been very generous with their findings. Now shall we discuss the real future of the quantum network? In her healing pod, Kira's eyes snapped open, glowing with the same light as her crystal. Vale's crystal pulsed in response, and reality itself seemed to shudder. The network is awakening, Vale said, his voice filled with twisted joy. And we will guide its rebirth. Jun looked at Tors, saw the same calculation in her eyes that he felt. Sometimes, he thought, the enemy of your enemy isn't your friend, they're just the devil you choose to dance with. The crystals pulsed again, stronger now, and Jun could have sworn he heard them singing. The choice. The Liberty's Dawn shuddered as another quantum thread tore open nearby, its violent birth sending ripples through space-time. In the ship's medical bay, two crystals pulsed in opposition, one in Dr. Vale's hand glowing blood red, the other in Kira's grip shining with pure starlight. You don't understand what you're dealing with, Kira said, her voice echoing with otherworldly harmonics. The crystal's energy flowed through her, showing her visions of possibilities, of futures both glorious and terrible. Vale laughed, his own crystal casting crimson shadows across his face. I understand perfectly. The ancients were cowards, using this network merely to prevent disaster. Think bigger, child. With these crystals, we could reshape reality itself. By destroying everything in the process, Admiral Torres said, her cybernetic eye calculating trajectories as her loyal guards engaged Vale's conspirators. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the medical bay as the battle erupted. Jun dove behind a medical console, pulling Venna with him. Rockar had already taken cover, his massive frame barely protected by an overturned bed. The quantum fluctuations are increasing exponentially, Venna reported, checking her instruments. The network isn't just awakening, it's having a seizure. Through the viewport, they could see more threads appearing, their ethereal light casting impossible colors across the void. Each new tier in space triggered others, creating a cascade effect that threatened to unravel the fabric of the galaxy. We need to shut it down, Jun said, firing at one of Vale's men. All of it, the whole network. That's suicide, Vale shouted, his crystal flaring as he used it to deflect incoming fire. The threads exist naturally. Without the network to control them, they'll run wild. Entire systems will be swallowed. Better than your alternative, Torres growled, her cybernetic arm transforming into a weapon. You'll end up breaking reality itself. Kira stood in the center of the chaos, the crystal's light forming a protective barrier around her. Through its power, she could see the truth. The quantum threads weren't just passages through space. They were the galaxy's nervous system, a delicate web that kept reality in balance. And now that web was unraveling. There's another way, she said, her voice cutting through the firefight. The ancients didn't build the network to control the threads, they built it to communicate with them. Vale paused, his crystal dimming slightly. What? The threads aren't just random tiers in space, Kira continued, understanding flowing through her from the crystal. They're alive, conscious. The ancients didn't create a control system, they created a translation matrix. Impossible, Vale whispered, but his uncertainty was visible. Another thread tore open dangerously close to the ship, its energy setting off every alarm on board. Through the viewport, they could see the coalition fleet struggling to maintain position as reality buckled around them. Kira, Jun called out, seeing the strain on her face as she channeled the crystal's power. Whatever you're going to do, do it fast. She nodded, raising her crystal higher. The threads are trying to communicate. All this time, they've been reaching out trying to talk to us, but without the network functioning properly, their attempts just cause damage. And what are they trying to say? Torres asked, her weapon still trained on Vale. That we have a choice, Kira replied. We can try to control them like Vale wants and watch as they tear everything apart in response. We can shut down the network like you suggest and leave them trapped in silence. She took a deep breath. Or we can rebuild the network the way it was meant to be, not as a cage, but as a bridge. Vale's crystal pulsed again, but weaker now. You're just a child, you can't possibly understand. I understand better than you, Kira cut him off. Because I actually listened. The crystal didn't choose me because I'm special. It chose me because I was willing to learn instead of trying to control. The ship shuddered again as another thread manifested. But this time, something was different. The light from Kira's crystal reached out, touching the quantum tier, and for a moment everyone could hear it, a song beautiful and alien and somehow familiar. The threads, Venna breathed, her instruments going haywire. They're harmonizing. Kira turned to Vale, holding out her hand. You can feel it too, can't you? Through your crystal. They're not trying to destroy or control. They're trying to connect. Vale's hands shook, the red crystal's light flickering between crimson and pure starlight. All this time, he whispered, we were so wrong. Help me, Kira said. Help me rebuild the bridge. For a moment, the fate of the galaxy hung in balance. Then Vale lowered his crystal and stepped forward. Show me how. What happened next would be debated by scholars for centuries. Some said the crystals merged, others that they simply resonated at the perfect frequency. All anyone knew for certain was that the light from the crystals reached out to touch the quantum threads, and the threads responded. The song became audible to everyone, a symphony of reality itself, as the threads began to stabilize. Not through control or force, but through harmony. It's working, Venna reported, tears in her silver eyes. The quantum fluctuations are stabilizing the network. It's healing itself. Through the viewport, they watched as the violent tears in space transformed into elegant bridges of light, each one a conversation between dimensions, each one a promise of connection rather than destruction. Kira swayed, exhausted but smiling. Jun caught her before she could fall, the crystal in her hands now pulsing with a gentle, steady light. "What happens now?" Rockar asked, looking at the transformed threads. "Now," Kira said softly, "we learn to listen, really listen. The threads have so much to teach us if we're willing to learn." Admiral Tors stepped forward, her cybernetic eye taking in the changed quantum landscape. "The Coalition will help protect this knowledge," she said. "Not to control it, but to ensure it's used the way it was meant to be, to connect, not divide." Vale's crystal had transformed, its red light now as pure as Kira's. "I'll help," he said quietly, "to make amends." Jun looked down at Kira, seeing not just the tired 12-year-old who'd crashed into his cargo hold, but someone who'd changed the very nature of their understanding of the universe. "So," he said with a slight smile, "does this mean we're not smugglers anymore?" Kira laughed, leaning against him. "Oh, we're definitely something else now. We're bridges." The crystals pulsed in agreement, their light merging with the quantum threads that stretched across the galaxy. And in the spaces between spaces, in the quantum songs that bound reality together, new possibilities awakened. The adventure wasn't ending, it was just beginning. The end.